The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
I know it's been a while since I've done an episode like this, but I wanted to give you a bit of history, not a distant history, but in fact, the history of our present, of how we got to where we are with the quote unquote progressive movement in this country. We've come to a stage in the burgeoning progressive movement. I want to start by saying, one, I in no way, form, or fashion consider myself or want to be considered by anyone to be a leader of this movement. A leader, certainly not the leader, but not even a leader. For my own personal reasons and my own political reasons, political ideology reasons. I have a very specific ideology that I feel is going to clash with everybody at some point, and that's fine. But for all those reasons, I feel like I don't consider myself, and nor do I want to be considered. But there was a burgeoning movement that has come under full assault since the election of Joe Biden. And to be honest with you, it has been a consistent assault that has been waged, a war that's been waged on the fledgling, right? It was burgeoning. But the attacks on the left/progressive movement in this country, and it's important that I make that distinction, this country, seated an empire. The attacks started many, many years ago. And that's kind of what I want to give you the history of. But before I give you the history of it, many of you were here and most of you may know this. Some of you may not have been here, but I maybe just needed a reminder. But before I get to the history, I just want to say that you can tell a tree by the fruit it bears. That's how scripture says it. Look at the results and you can tell the intention. Because nothing just happens. What am I talking about? The results of everything that has happened since Joe Biden was elected would force the vote with all these movements, as I called it back when it was happening. Cost me a lot of followers, cost me a lot of patrons, and I'll do it again. But I called it then. And now we're seeing the full manifestation of the results, which has been to undermine the burgeoning progressive movement in this country, the movement that actually could have gotten us Medicare for all, the movement that could actually help get the Green New Deal. Was it going to come during Joe Biden's term? Absolutely not. And anyone who sold you that bill of goods in any form or fashion was lying to you, gaslighting you. It wasn't going to come through Joe Biden's administration, and nor was it going to come from some outside revolution. And because people were so disillusioned, the movement that started in 2015, or that I became aware of in 2015, because it is so effective and so efficient, what has been done to the left over the last couple of months. And I've seen it consistently be attempted over the last 7 years, 6 or 7 years. I can't assume that it only started in 2015, right? I think historically, we probably could find plenty of examples. But in the resurgence, during the resurgence of the progressive movement in this country, that, oh, by the way, I know I'm giving a lot of caveats, but I haven't talked to you in a long time, so allow me to go on these tangents to get all of my thoughts out. At the moment that this country was seeing a genuine progressive movement being born from within its empire, at a level of power, gaining a level of political power that really has not been seen in our lifetimes. Let's be sure about that. In our lifetimes, the majority of us who are probably Generation X and a few boomers, young boomers who are listening to this podcast, in our lifetimes, we have not seen this level of organization on the left, period. That's because it was gunned down in the late 60s. They destroyed the progressive left in this country with the sniper rifle over and over and over and over again, to the point where all that was left was the people who were okay with neoliberalism. And that's what I was born into. 1980, I was born right when Ronald Reagan was getting ready to sign the Roth-Kemp tax cuts into law, bringing trickle-down economics to this country, bringing Thatcherism to this country, bringing the Laffer curve to this country. That's what I was born into. We weren't born into a generation where there was organized leftist movements in the empire. No, and it was non-existent. Matter of fact, I'm going on all the tangents today. I haven't talked to you in a while. I'm going to get back to well, I guess this is somewhat the history. Me and my wife were watching Bill Cosby's spinoff show, A Different World. Came out, I believe it was 1988 when it came out. I was a little boy, and we watched it all the way through like 92. And as soon as they actually discussed actual revolutionary things, discussing the LA riots and the aftermath of the Rodney King beating and the subsequent acquittal of the officers, they shut A Different World down. But as we were watching it, we've been binge watching it over the weekend. And as we watched it, episode after episode full of anti-counter-revolutionary messaging, like straight out. We're not talking about wrapping up black aspirational hopes for us, excelling to the boule and all those kind of things that people give the standard critique of the Cosby Show around. That's a standard critique, and that's true. No, I'm talking about directly counter-revolutionary messages, all the way down to saying that they didn't even want to smoke Cuban cigars because they were communists. I mean, from the highest level all the way down to the petty. That's what we were born into. And the reason we were able to be born into that is because they gunned down the left. They marginalized, neutralized, and assassinated the left. And so an entire era was born when you had absolutely no nationwide. A whole generation of people were born into an America where there was no nationwide leftist movement. There were always professors. There were always revolutionaries. There are always political prisoners. This is not to say that it did not exist. What I am saying is that it did not exist in the way that it started to be born again in 2015. And immediately, as it was being born again, we saw efforts to suggest that the proper way to grow the left in this country was to align with the populist right. This isn't new. This attempt to make league with these, and again, let me go back a little bit further, because I have to give historical context from where people are manipulating and gaslighting the masses and distorting the facts. A lot of folks are going to say, well, Ben, wasn't that something that Fred Hampton tried to do? And this is something that I've had to regularly debunk. Yeah, Fred Hampton attempted to make an alliance with the Young Patriot Organization, but the Young Patriot Organization was expressly anti-racist. See, the alliance that has been attempted time and time and again in this country since 2015 alone has always been one that would sacrifice identity politics in exchange for right-wing populism. See, right-wing populists and quote-unquote populists in this country will never be willing to fight on behalf of marginalized groups that are expressly marginalized because of their identity, because because the conservatives in this country are the masters of identity politics, not just in terms of how they promote white identitarian politics, and not just because of how they protect and defend white Christian men to the death, but expressly because they use the hatred and the bigotry that is pointed towards marginalized groups, towards immigrants, towards black people, towards people of color, towards minorities, towards Asians in this country. That's their bread and butter. That's the bread and butter of the conservative movement. And so the exact difference is what matters the most, in that Fred Hampton attempted to make league with poor white people who were expressly anti-racist. And everything that has been attempted time and again in this country at least since 2015, I'm sure it's happened long before this. But you could see it because it was social media just made it so transparent. They've been trying to drop identity politics in order to make league with right-wing populists in this country. So we would have to give up our fight on behalf of the LGBTQIA. I mean, they've already, Glenn Greenwald is already out here attacking the trans community. Like, that was an easy shift. I didn't expect it to be so easy for him. Right? We have, people, you have a couple of black people who are out here saying, oh, we don't care about race. There's no such, you got people out literally making league with Nazis and doing it in the name of blackness. So you've always had groups of people inside of every community that's willing to do the bidding of white supremacy. But it never got enough gas in this country until 2021. And that's because they needed the disillusionment of people who were new to politics and passionate about politics and didn't realize how dirty of a game it was. And it's very possible for us to have done our very best to get Bernie Sanders elected in 2016 and in 2020 and lose both times, because the establishment is absolutely there to protect itself. Absolutely. We got blindsided in South Carolina, and there was a level of disillusionment that went across the entire country of people who were fighting on behalf of progressive causes, and they were just sitting there waiting for that opportunity to seize upon it. But to give you the history, I mean, they've come a long way. They, being the people who are absolutely seeking to destroy. It's not even about, I want to be sure, it's not about a glorious unification of working people for the purposes of revolution. All right. I want us to get that straight. There's a lot that's happening. That's not one of the things that's happening. There's a lot of people who are engaged in politics for a lot of reasons, but the reason that they're here is not to unify the left and the right for the purposes of a revolution that will lead to an egalitarian society. That's not what they're after. What they have been after has been to neutralize the progressive, the burgeoning, the flourishing, the growing progressive movement. You can tell a tree by the fruit it bears. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that in this episode. You can tell the intention by the results. Look at the results of everything that we have been faced since since November, since the election of Joe Biden. As it pertains to the left, we have seen an all-out assault on nobody but the progressive movement. Those same people who are all out attacking the squad, not that they are above reproach and they don't deserve criticisms and critiques, but we are well past criticisms and critiques. We're at the point of death threats from people who claim to be leftists. We're well past reasonable criticisms of strategy. We're at the stage where it is just purely for performance and clout, because you can build a platform off of attacking the progressives in this country. And where is this glorious revolution and the unification that would come first between the populist left and the populist right? It doesn't exist. It will never exist. You know why? Because in order for you to be in league with the populist right in this country, you have got to betray everything that you believe in. You've got to betray the fact that you believe that all people are created equal. You have to betray the fact that you believe that we should have the separation of church and state. You would have to betray the fact that you believe that capitalism is actually the bane of our existence, because the populist right in this country, they want populist rhetoric, but they don't want to get rid of capitalism because it works just fine for them because they are well funded. So what is the result? Was it a unification between the right and the left? Jimmy Dore had on the Proud Boys. Did that jump it off? No. You know why? Because there are those of you who were disillusioned, who actually listened to them, you believed them, but something in you said it's not right because you did not want to be in league with those bigots and those true fascists. It was never going to happen. So what happened? The very thing that I said happened. And again, I want to reiterate here. I don't personally ever want to be considered a leader of any movement. I believe that this movement has to be decentralized. Leadership has to be democratized and decentralized, because anytime you have one person or a small group of people who are the leaders of a movement, that it becomes that much easier to take them down. So just as a matter of political strategy, there should not be any single leader. But here we are. Funny enough, as you look at the lay of the land, after all the attacks, after all of the slams and all of the videos and all the clicks and all of the angry and you've been betrayed by the squad and Ilhan Omar is a grifter and AOC is out to get you, and they've even now said that Nina Turner is a conservative. They are preemptively attacking Nina Turner before she even gets into office. And who are we left with? Jimmy Dore and Ryan Knight. And that's about it. That's what we are left with. And what has it done? It has divided the left in this country to the point where what was a gloriously burgeoning and beautiful, the potential of what was being built was something that was an absolute threat to this empire. Because the real threat, listen, I don't care what nobody says. Let me tell you something. I'm just going to say this one for free, and I'm not going to belabor this point too long. The real threat was never going to come from outside this country, not when we are as belligerent as we are with all of our nuclear weapons and all of our willingness and propensity to go to war at the drop of a dime. You got Christians. I ain't even talking about evangelicals. They were going to support it. You got black Christians who sit back and got no problem with the warmongering of this country, right? The real threat was never going to come from the outside. The real threat to this empire was always a leftist movement that was rooted in the humanity of every person on the face of this planet, growing from within this empire. That has always been the real threat. And what has been under attack? I don't care what criticisms you have of any politicians. I don't like any of them. I'm closer to Bernie Sanders and the squad than anybody else in Washington, D.C., but that don't mean I've been criticizing Bernie Sanders since 2015. Okay? This is not to say that you cannot critique them, but look at the results. After months of the relentless attacks, what's left? What has been accomplished? Are we any closer to getting Medicare for all? No, we are further away. And it is so brilliant. It's so Machiavellian. I'm going to be honest with you. I sent out a tweet, I don't know how many years ago, but I sent out a tweet and I was like, we really have not seen what the healthcare industry and the private insurance companies are going to do in terms of attacking us and stopping us. Because we're not talking about ending capitalism, but we're talking about ending capitalism for them. And the games and the amount of money that would be poured into neutralizing this progressive movement that had a singular focus for the longest time. Really tangible goals, Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, $15 an hour. And what do we have? Where are we now with any of those? Oh, Ben, it's the Democratic Party fault that That's the easy, the Democratic Party getting rid of the the Kirsten Sinemas and the Joe Manchins of the Senate, getting rid of the $15 an hour. That was easy for them. You know what's more difficult? In the time of COVID-19, when everyone is getting accustomed to getting this shot, this vaccine for free without any, just all you got to do is get an appointment, is the expectation and the realization, rather, that we could have a better healthcare. That was in play. That was on the board. That was on the board. That was in the range of possibilities. And who's under attack? Are corporate Dems under attack from the left? No. And I say left, and you can't see me, but I'm using air quotes because I offer to you that these people were never the left. Jimmy Dore is not a leftist. He's not. He's an opportunist. And I will not be surprised one bit if when all the dust settles that there is funding coming in from the right as well as from centrist for this really simple play, which is to try to outflank the progressive movement from the left, to neutralize the burgeoning movement, to neutralize it. And now you get all you're left with is Ryan Knight and Jimmy Dore. And I know that's a microcosm because we're talking about quote unquote social media, right? But let's not be coy. We know the power of social media. This is why right wingers spend millions of dollars every week, billions of dollars every year across all the different. Ben Shapiro spends at one time he was spending $100,000 a month advertising, promoting his one show. Okay. So let's not pretend on social media. Let's not be coy. Social media has impact. It has power. In fact, it is how a lot of these politicians, and they know that. So what they have done, they're not able to stop AOC at this point. We'll keep our eye on her. Ambition is a hell of a drug. I don't know that I have to keep my eye on her. But you know what they've done? They have neutralized our ability to galvanize new people from the masses of social media and elevate them to the position of at least a congressperson. So the bridges have been burned. And they weren't burned by the squad. They were burned by people who think that they're more progressive, that they're more revolutionary, that they're the real leftists. Okay, cool. You got the title. You got it, champ. But this is the same game that has been played on this movement at least since 2015. Started off with H.A. Goodman. You guys remember him? I told you I was going to give you a little history. 2015, he and Cassandra Fairbanks, they were these people who were like, okay, well, Bernie didn't win the primary, so we're going to go over there and support Donald Trump. We're going to go over here and work with fascists. That's where it started. And then every year subsequent after that, you look at Twitter. Look at Twitter. You could use the timestamps on Twitter and you could see every summer for the last 6 years, there's been a concerted effort to unify the populist left and the populist right. Only it comes at the expense of marginalized communities because the right can't, and it comes at the expense of your anti-capitalist critique. The right in this country is never going to unify with you to overthrow capitalism. And then pray tell, they dangle this chimera of unifying with working right wingers across the country as the idea that's going to lead to the glorious revolution. And again, it is just still like, you guys have had us out of the way for the last couple of months. I haven't said much about this. I haven't done a single episode on this in months. How did it work out for you? How did it work out? Oh, that's right. Everyone became more consumed with cancel culture than Medicare for all. See, I peeped game back in when George Floyd was killed, and it was a bunch of liberals out there protesting, And to be sure, the only reason I'm saying it like that is not because it wasn't a whole bunch of radicals out there. There was a bunch of radicals out there, but the way it was neutralized was because all the criticisms were, oh, this isn't the real revolution because there are too many liberals out there. Check the time records. Some people could have deleted their tweets and they could have deleted their videos by now. But that's the criticism of the George Floyd protest during the summer, was that it was too many liberals. So you guys have had the lay of the land over the last couple of months. Nobody's been in your way. I haven't said a thing. How's that unification with the right going? Because that's the promise. That's the promise. And there's never been any delivery on it. Now has it? That's because there's so many people who want a revolution and were willing to consider unifying with right wingers, the working class of the right. But you knew in your heart that you could never be comfortable with the level of vitriolic bigotry that is at the root of everything they do over there. And there's just a handful of people who used to occupy our spaces and claim to be leftists, who are now trying to sheepdog you on the way over there. They're trying to move you, and they consistently have been doing it. The state of the left right now in this country. Here's the thing. It is very possible that because AOC is such a talented politician, that she has aspirations that go beyond her immediate political goals that she's fighting. I don't know. It's very possible. But she's in power now. She raised $20 million last year. And everybody's upset because she gave was it 0.00025%? I saw one tweet to some centrist Democrats buying some loyalty from them because that's how the game. She had to donate the money anyway. You got to donate to be a part of the Democratic Party. That's just how party politics goes. I only bring up the money because she's fine. AOC is fine. But what they have done is that they have utterly neutralized and obliterated the ladder to power from working class to Washington, D.C. Because the way we did it, the way it was done, was by us finding each other in the algorithm, finding each other on Twitter, finding each other on social media, realizing we've got so much in common, realizing that, man, wow, I didn't know there was this many leftists out here. I didn't realize that there was this many progressives. I didn't realize that there was a time on Twitter, just as a side note, as an aside, there was a time on Twitter where people weren't even talking about their poverty experience. I remember, I don't claim to be the person who started that conversation because there's millions of conversations going on, but in the circle, and I've had a pretty large circle for a long time, there's like, when I broached the topic of our poverty, of our shared poverty experiences on social media, it was so uncomfortable for a lot of people, for me included. And it was just like, wow, now we can use this space to be honest, and we don't have to flex for the gram. We don't have to worry about the need to look like we're so successful, because we could just be honest. And then we found out that in that honesty, that there were so many people who are struggling with poverty. We found each other on social media. And from those ranks, a couple of people made it all the way to Washington, D.C. And we got to keep our eye on them. But you know what they've done successfully? You want to know the results of Force the Vote? The tally is in. It's the same thing I said. I don't care about I told you so. Somebody on Twitter said Benjamin Dixon was right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's not that I can't be wrong. But I'm wrong. When it comes to this political analysis thing, I've been so right that it was to the point of arrogance, and that's why I took it on the chin so hard, because I was arrogant in my truth. Yeah, we had that conversation. I have to have that conversation again. But what has been the result? I might have been an asshole, but I wasn't wrong. It has been to neutralize this burgeoning progressive movement. That's all. And to enrich a couple of voices and to give some people some clout. It's a hell of a thing. Clout is a hell of a drug. You know, cocaine is a hell of a drug. No, clout is a hell of a drug. Clout is a hell of a drug. And I don't really care about politics because I see how frivolous it is, how foolish it is, how stupid it is, how utterly like it is so devoid of substance. It is so soulless. American politics is so soulless. This country, this empire is so. But I certainly did not and do not care about these numbers. Don't care. Lost, I don't know, what, 10, 20,000? I don't know, 20,000, probably 20,000 followers on Twitter. About 700 patrons. You know what? I would do it again. I would just do it a little more graciously. Okay. That's the only thing. But I mention that because the results have been just a couple of contrarian, semi-stars, not superstars, but semi-stars who make their entire existence off of attacking the pathway for working people to have a shot at actually getting political power in this country. They're not going to destroy AOC. She's already ascended into the pantheon of historical figures in this country, which is why we got to keep our eye on her, because ambition is the hellavest of a drug. Okay. Have no idea what she's really thinking beyond the fact that I'm still going to give her the benefit of the doubt based on what she said when she was running and what I see her saying online. Don't mean I'm not going to give her the side eye every step of the way. But what have we done? I know I've said it 3 times. I'm going to say it for a 4th time. We've seen a complete neutralization. Do you think that we would ever be able to get a unified left excited about another candidate like we were excited about Bernie Sanders? Or hell, like we were excited about when AOC beat Crowley in the primary? No. And that was the point. Now, riddle me this. Who does it help? Does it help the glorious revolution? No. Does it help us get closer to Medicare for all? No. Does it help the Green Party get more than 1%? No. So who does it help? It helps the right-wing authoritarianism in this country. And it helps the Democratic establishment. It helps the establishment, the consensus, the duopoly, the very thing that they use to make all their points. They are literally benefiting the duopoly. So if we could tell a tree by the fruit it bears, or we can tell the intention by the results, you tell me, what was the intention all along? That's all I got, folks.